Hi, I'm Winter. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently a student at UQ.
My name is Riley. I use they, them, she, her pronouns, and I'm a student here at UQ, and I lost my job the other day, so I'm currently unemployed. I guess if you looked it up in a dictionary, it'd probably say something like the incongruence between one's internal gender and the one assigned at birth.
Being transgender really just means identifying as a gender that wasn't assigned to you at birth. It's pretty much that simple. To me, being transgender is a lot more about the positive experiences of what we call like gender euphoria, just the happy feelings that I get when my gender is affirmed by the things that I do and the people around me do, and it's just a really positive, heartwarming experience most of the time, which I don't think we get to focus on a lot.
A lot of it's me, I guess, just moving away from masculinity. I still haven't figured myself out, but it's kind of just like trying different things on and seeing what works.
Well, pronouns are a type of word in the English language. They're not a new thing that was invented by Tumblr. I, we, he, she, they're all pronouns. Everybody uses them, regardless of if you're cis or trans. And they're just words that we use to describe each other.
I think the most appropriate way is probably just to ask for my pronouns. I think in an ideal world that gender shouldn't be important in how you interact with someone.
Being unsure is, perfectly fine. It's always good not to assume people's genders if possible, but I'm always comfortable if someone wants to ask me my pronouns when they first meet me, or to sort of confirm what sort of language I like to be referred to with. And I don't think, that that's something that I feel uncomfortable with, then I think everybody should feel comfortable with that. I think one of the main misconceptions is that being trans is a choice. For me personally, I definitely was aware that I was a girl from a very young age, and it took some time to be able to express that. But that was definitely something innate to me, and a lot of trans people share that experience. And I think a lot of cis people, or cisgendered, not trans people, kind of don't think about how they don't choose their gender, and they just are who they are, and that's the same with us. So I think that's the first common misconception. Another one I can think of is that being trans is a trend. It's new, it's a fad. We've been around for centuries, for millennia. We've been seen across cultures, and we're not going away, and we've been here a while, so we're sticking around. And I think the last misconception is the idea that medically transitioning is this easy sort of process. You walk into the doctor's office, they just give you drugs, and then you're on your way and your dick's chopped off. It's just not that simple. Especially in Australia, they've got lots of regulations around the processes you have to go through, especially if you're under 18. And that's really designed not just to keep us safe, but also to make sure that we're really sure of what we want to go through and understand the things we're going through.
I feel like the most obvious answer and the most negative one is that trans women are like fetishists, or that being trans is a fetish, and that is wrong. Plain and simple. I don't know how else to put it. It is really just becoming more comfortable with yourself. There is this connection that trans people have with porn that I don't think anytime soon will be could be unlinked. Like, a lot of trans people figure themselves out, like, through porn and through fetishes and stuff. And in some ways, like, trans inclusive porn can make you feel better about yourself and your body. I feel in Australia there is pretty good access to gender affirming healthcare, at least at like a base level. Like, accessing hormones is relatively easy. I say that even though I got denied HRT the first time that I asked for it. I feel like accessing things like more like greater than that is often seen as like cosmetic or like optional, or something that doesn't really matter, when I feel like they should be seen as corrective surgeries.
I think it's really dependent on the workplace themselves. The previous work that I was at a local fruit and veg shop, which is kind of mom and pop shop, and they were a very Greek Orthodox family. So I was not openly trans while working there, because I was completely unsure of how they would respond to that. And so for my safety, that was something that I had to do, not to disclose that. And it was kind of scary in some points, but overall I survived, and I'm now at a different job which is a lot more accepting of gender diverse people, and I feel a lot more safe and comfortable in that work environment, and I know that I'll be supported if anything goes wrong.
Coming to the realization that you're trans is kind of traumatic, and seeing yourself as you are can be stressful and dysphoric, to use the word, and that these things should be a part of our healthcare system and should be free or rebated, or whatever the word is. This is particularly coming from like the US and the UK, that there is a media and political bias against trans people at the moment. We're becoming a wedge issue that people can align themselves. Are you for or against trans people? And they're kind of trying to make us the issue. I feel like there's also like a pressure for me as someone who I think I want to present more femininely. If I want to get gendered correctly like that, I have to be hyper feminine. I have to like hide my masculine features a lot more. Like, the other night I went out for dinner with my family. I was dressed in all female clothing. I had makeup, I had mascara and eyeliner on, and I was queued up for the toilets. And this is very classic, and a male toilet became free, and I was told to use that when I was like, what man dresses like this?
I think the process of coming out as transgender is very difficult, not only for trans people, but for their friends and family in a way, because it is a change, but it's not a bad change, and learning to sort of adjust takes time, and I think a lot of people are very hesitant to change, but this is something that we need to do for our own well-being. And if you can't support us in that, then, it's prioritizing yourself over our well-being and your comfort over our safety.
Sorry, I haven't come out in any workplaces as trans yet. Coming out is something that's still relatively unnatural to me, and I feel like I kind of have to vet workplaces while I still can, because I'm still relatively mass presenting most of the time, or you can't tell that I'm trans most of the time. I don't know, it feels a little bit isolating. Like, I don't quite feel like I can connect to everybody there because I feel like I'm hiding the secret. Like, I want to connect to women in the workplace more, but I still kind of feel like that because I'm mass presenting there's this kind of gender divide that it's hard to push over, and I don't know, talking to women is hard sometimes, even just in a platonic way. I said earlier that I lost my job recently, and I wasn't really given a good reason for that. It was just kind of, we can't give you any hours anymore, and that was that. And there's this kind of paranoia that's now in my head, because I don't know whether it was like just because they couldn't give me any hours, or it was because they didn't like me, or was it because they found out I'm trans? Because I didn't really hide it. Like, I didn't outright tell them, but I was very loose with my gender at work there. And so I was like, oh, they figured it out and then they got rid of me. But of course, there's no way to prove that.
I think a really important and easy thing to do is for workplaces to ask for people's pronouns, just like even just start of a job interview, when you're first hired, that sort of thing. My current job did that, and that made me feel really safe, and I knew that, okay, they're kind of aware that, you know, gender diverse people exist and that they're comfortable kind of showing that support for them, and they also include their pronouns at the bottom of their emails. So I think that's also a really good way of just showing solidarity.
Honestly, I feel like the best way to make a workplace more inclusive is to have other queer people working there. I don't trust kind of like the corporate mandates that go like, this is how you treat queer people, this is the correct way that you treat these people. No, it's just I want other people to relate to and could potentially fight with me for workplace rights if they were ever breached.
To me, supporting a transgender person or transgender people as a whole is less about what you say or what you think and more about what you do. You know, showing that support by using the correct language, by standing up for them when they can't stand up for themselves, calling out your relatives when they're being transphobic, going to rallies if you can, protests, signing petitions, because being trans in this current political climate is a political stance. And if you want to support your trans friends and be an ally, then you need to be politically active as well.
I feel like at like an individual level, it's just treating them like a person, and then I guess gendering them correctly and correcting pronouns whenever they are incorrect. But at a grander level, a lot of trans people are kind of under or unemployed, and if you're in any online trans spaces, it's kind of hard to avoid not coming across like mutual aids, like, oh, I've run out of money for rent this week, I've run out of money for hormones this week, I'm trying to leave my house because it's abusive, ... And I feel like just supporting those funds, if and when you can, is another good way to be a good ally.
I think the most important thing is education and early education. You know, just talking about gender to kids isn't going to make them trans. Just kind of explaining that, you know, the distinction between sex and gender, and you know, people can be born male and feel like a boy, or sometimes they're born male and feel like a girl, vice versa, or they feel like neither. And sort of you can start to explain those sort of base concepts earlier on, and education is what leads to tolerance and acceptance. And that's really the main way that we can combat transphobia in society more broadly.
An ideal society would be degendered but not genderless, like the legal systems in our interpersonal lives. I don't see why sex kind of has to be on like our license or even our birth certificate probably. And I feel like if there were a way to just remove the need for legal names as well, potentially, could be nice, because that way there's just a freedom of, oh, I don't like being called Jonathan anymore. I would like to be called Tim now. There are no legal hoops to jump through if that were the case. I'd like to see just trans people in media more as just regular characters and not just as like these points of suffering that we typically are portrayed as in media at the moment. I feel like Yasmin from Heartstopper is a good example of representation of trans people in our media. Like, she is openly trans, like it isn't a character that is queer-baited or could be trans, but isn't, like, being trans isn't her only character trait, and she's treated with respect.
I think one of the best examples I can think of is this Stan or maybe Binge original Pose, which follows like this group of trans black women trying to make their way in the city and just living life and dealing with the real issues of being trans, while also showing that they can live happy, fulfilling lives. And I think it shows a very good balance between, you know, the hardships of being trans, but also that, you know, our lives aren't just full of despair and misery, and we can live happy, fulfilling lives.
My first point of advice is that if you're still in the early stages, still figuring it out, please put aside time to figure it out, because if you don't, then like your body or your mind will put aside time for you, and that could potentially be very crippling. It was for me. In saying that though, you don't have to come up with a definitive answer, because like I still haven't, and I'm like a year on from crisis mode. Just a general idea of where you want to be is enough. Don't expect your experiences or like to line up perfectly with like the stories and experiences of other trans people that you meet online. Like I feel like mine don't. Like I'm one of those lucky people that is not very dysphoric most of the time, and that was kind of invalidating at the beginning, because it's like, well, this is a very big part of the trans community that I don't think I have. Well, I do, but like at the time I didn't think I had. And make friends with trans people, because they're nice.
I think if you are questioning, the important thing to know is that whatever decision you come to, that is perfectly fine. If you question and decide that you are cis, that's wonderful. If you question and decide you're trans or some other label, that's also great. And there's really no rush. You can take your time, you can change your mind. Nothing is set in stone. So feel free to like experiment with different names, pronouns, and see what feels right, what fits right. And it's always helpful also to see a counselor if you can, so they can help you through those sort of feelings, and you can sort of talk about it with someone if you don't feel comfortable talking to your friends or family. And I think those are my main advice. One great one that also does stuff with sort of protests and social groups is Equal Love Brisbane. So they do a lot of just general sort of LGBT stuff as well as trans stuff, and they're a very inclusive group. I'd also recommend reaching out to your universities or your schools' kind of queer groups if you've got one. I know the one at UQ is very friendly and lovely, so definitely give them a check out if you have the time. And as far as like mental health advice, Headspace is known for being LGBT friendly, so if you need some help and advice, they're always good to chat to as well.
A good online resource is the Transgender Dysphoria Bible. It's an online resource that kind of breaks down the different types of dysphoria that exists, and even things that you might think aren't dysphoria probably are, and it's kind of like points out the dysphoria with people who like haven't realized that they're trans yet is different from people who have, and that really helped me when I was still figuring things out. And if you're in in Brisbane or the Sunshine Coast, there's a support group called Transcendence that runs every month. That is good.
I think that now that being trans and queer issues in general are becoming more prominent in the media, we're seeing a lot more people able to stand up and, you know, have their say and voice their opinions, and it's just been really opening the conversation and allowing more change to happen. And I think it's been really good to see generationally that young people are becoming significantly more accepting than, you know, Gen X and the boomers and that sort of stuff. So I think generally we're going in a pretty good direction.
I feel like queer representation in media in general has gotten a lot better over the past couple of years, and that makes me very happy, and it's allowed a lot of people to accept themselves and for us to just become a normalized part of society. I think I heard yesterday that in the UK the number of people, the number of young people identifying as gender diverse has doubled over the past 10 years, which I think is pretty cool. But there's a picnic being held by Many Genders One Voice, a trans picnic that you could come along to and meet some people. I plan to go.
Check Facebook all the time. There's heaps of different queer groups that are, you know, having events on, whether they're just social or whether they're, you know, fighting for change. We've also got the Brisbane Festival Pride March and Pride Fair coming up at the end of September, which will be super exciting and heaps of fun. So I definitely check those out.